our first panel, I believe is still Jeff. Okay. And I just met Jeff about 30 minutes ago. I'm solving a problem. That basically describes Jeff in a nutshell. He is the partner at ColorJar. Is an accomplished entrepreneur and innovator in the fields of internet e-commerce and entertainment, having launched his first software company while he was a young student at Yale University. You know him there. Jeff writes a regular column on innovation and entrepreneurship in Inc. magazines, and works with the White House, the Executive Office of the President, the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. Department of Commerce to support businesses and economic growth initiatives all over the world. He just told me he just got back from Asia. Prior to that, Jeff served as the CEO of Enable Holdings, Inc., one of the world's leading excess inventory solution companies, a publicly traded company that operates online and sold over $2 billion worth of computers, consumers, electronic goods, all sorts of things since its launch. So Jeff, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
All right, I'm going to use my PowerPoint over here.
Okay.
I'll keep track of the time. I think so, yeah. I think they're all. Oh, hang on one second. Mine was on the desktop. I just can't get it. There it is. Okay, I don't think you can hear me in the back, right? I don't really think I need the microphone per se to talk about this. What I do want to talk about is kind of the SME perspective. So I've been doing small businesses and startups for my entire life. The biggest startup that I was part of was we started a company called Priceline.com, and today Priceline is in 50 different countries. So we went through the startup phase, through growth, through globalization, in a lot of different governments and a lot of different regions to build that company. But last year I kind of made a decision. This was really more focused on trying to give back by spending my time mentoring entrepreneurs, startups, and small businesses. And it wound up turning into, when I took the year off, now it's going to wind up being 2 years. So my 12-month plan is in month 22 right now. So much for planning. But when I got started on this, I suddenly got interested in the global state, not just in the US, but the global state of innovation and entrepreneurship. So I intentionally went on a world tour. Like in the last year, I went to every single continent. In the last year, I made, for example, 4 trips to Africa, north, west, south, and east, every part of Africa. And my time was, part of it in every country was spending time with a lot of governments, from prime ministers and ministers of commerce to local level of governments. But the more educational part for me was spending time with the small business owners and the innovators in every country, away from everything else, where they live, where they work, to see what they were up against and what it takes for them to create innovations and, as we said, stimulate economies and create jobs. Since we all know that the net new job creation is coming from businesses less than 5 years old. Obviously, governments, and I'll tell you from my perspective, having just been on this sort of world tour, we were just at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Kuala Lumpur, and I just spoke at that the other day, and we had entrepreneurs and innovators from 123 countries join us. So the educational opportunity for me is to sit down with as many of them as I could and listen to what they're up against in their countries, including there were a lot of U.S. Representatives there, what everybody's dealing with to create more jobs and to stimulate economies and to create innovation. That's sort of what I came here to share, a little bit of what we've learned. And before I go to my slides, I actually want to share a piece of good news that I think that it seems to me that for years we've been talking about, and I'm talking about on the SME and startup side, as small businesses, we've been saying, in a lot of places all over the world, sort of let us handle this, right? Let us build, let us create jobs, let us create value, let us innovate, we can help economies. And in a lot of governments, and I'm getting this firsthand from being on the ground there, in a lot of places around the world that wasn't very interesting. Big businesses, yes, I'm going to say this, big businesses which can also support political campaigns and other things seem to be a lot more interesting to a lot of governments, a lot of places. And no one was really listening. And it seems like in the last 2 years, all of a sudden, because I've been doing this for a long time. All of a sudden, in the last 2 years, now I'm getting calls, we all are, from governments at the high level, saying, wait, what was that whole entrepreneurship and innovation thing again? Because suddenly we think we need you guys. And it didn't feel like that until 2 years ago, that the focus was on small business creates value and creates jobs and stimulates the economy, and we better find more ways to help them. So the good news is, I've seen in the last 2 years, just last year and this year, far more support, far more interest, and far more activity on a global scale than I've ever seen for the support of small business people and the launch of it. But here's an even better piece of news. It's possible now in a way that it wasn't before, and I don't have this on the slide, I was just thinking about it when I was flying back here. I had 24 hours of traveling to think about it. A story that really illustrates for me the exciting part of all this, of SMEs and innovation, and what we need to do to support them. And let me just tell you a story. I was in Senegal. So I'm in kind of a rural part of West Africa with low expectations. I don't have any idea what I'm going to see. And there is a 19-year-old Senegalese man who works in the fields all day in agriculture. Because for all their lives, that's really all the opportunity they had was agriculture. But he has some ideas that he thinks would be great for his country and create jobs for a lot of people in West Africa. And in the past, he had no way to launch that business, and no way really to know how to launch a business like that or how to create a small business. But here's what happened. So I'm standing there with this guy in Senegal, and he said, Mr. Hoffman, can I show you my business idea? And I said, sure. And he starts talking. And this is, again, after spending a whole day in the fields in agriculture where he has no access really to business expertise or technology. And when he starts talking, I said, wait, time out. I mean, it was unbelievably impressive. I could have been standing on the campus of George Washington University, right? And I said, who taught you that? Where did he learn all this? Because he told me he's always been in the fields. In this case, he said, oh, Stanford. And I said, wait, you told me you've never left Senegal. How did you go to Stanford? He said, I didn't. He said, I take Stanford courses for free on Coursera, on the internet. Okay, that did not exist a very short time ago. Then he starts walking through the business model. And I said, where did you even learn those words? You didn't learn them in the fields of Senegal. Who taught you even to present that way? And he said, oh, TED Talks. When I work in the fields all day, but at night, when I have time to improve myself and build a better future for my country, I stay up all night and I take courses online and I watch TED Talks. And he said, Mr. Hoffman, that's how I found you. I saw you on a TED Talk and I emailed you and now you're standing here. Right? That opportunity didn't exist. Then he showed me his presentation. And I said, this is extremely well done. This is as good as any Stanford student. And I said, how did you learn how to write a presentation? And again, it wasn't in the fields of Senegal. He said, oh, SlideShare. It's a website that shares the world's best PowerPoints every week. So what we have now is a democracy of information that has created the opportunity for innovators who had nowhere to go with their ideas before to launch small businesses. And I think that is by far the most exciting thing I've seen in a long time. That kid can now, that young Senegalese, can now create a small business that creates jobs. He's doing great, by the way, in his country. But the democracy of information is what's enabling innovators to actually create businesses now. And so that's probably my first point, even though it's not what's on the slide, is that we have got to continue this democracy of information where people are sharing knowledge via the internet worldwide so that everybody has a fair chance. Because now that kid has access to the education that before you had to be in the States to get that education. I want to give you one more quick example. I was in Ghana, and there was some young Ghanaians that had a new technology idea. They don't want to live in Silicon Valley, okay? They want to create jobs in Ghana. They are proud of their country, and they want to help it. But they couldn't get infrastructure-wise what they needed. But what was amazing was they were equally as impressive. So by all of us sort of connecting the dots, which is the other big part of this, not only democracy of information, but working together to connect people. When I met these young men in Africa, in Ghana, we were able to get them. I was speaking at something called the Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Rio shortly thereafter. We were able, by alerting people to big companies in Ghana, by the way, say, you know, you've got some of the most brilliant people on the planet right here in your backyard, give them a chance. The big companies sponsored them to come to Rio. When they got to the conference in Rio, we entered them in the business plan competition. In the business plan competition, not only did they enter, 135 nations gathered with us in Rio for this event. They won. So not only did they win, but people from Silicon Valley were in the audience, and they said, these guys are brilliant. They funded the company 2 weeks is all that it took. Then they moved them to San Francisco just for 2 years to build the technology. Then they're going home to deploy it in Africa and create jobs. So again, the network of all of us working together. These two young men still call me like once a week from San Francisco. And David says, will you pinch me again? Because I have to be dreaming. He said, I was in my village in Ghana just a couple months ago. Now I'm in Silicon Valley, fully funded, launching a company that will create jobs all over Africa when I get home. So the ideas are not what's lacking in SMEs and innovation. It's some of the infrastructure and access, which I will talk about here. It's interesting, though, that when you talk to small businesses, which I did across, all over the world, but including here, when you use the term R&D, which we're talking about here, research and development sounds like a department of a large company. So when you ask these SMEs, do you do R&D? They say, we can't afford that, okay? And it's really interesting, but innovation, creating new products and finding new ways to solve old problems is what they see as their lifeblood, without a doubt. They are always resource limited, right? We need these small businesses to continue to create new economic models, and they're smart enough to do it, and they know how. But when you ask them, they'll always tell you that they're too busy. We can barely get our own work done. We're a small company. We just don't have time to do that. And they're reluctant to suggest, a lot of times, new ideas because, again, they have a small team with limited resources, and they're trying to get their core job done. But what's interesting, even though, as I talk to SMEs all over the world, they tell me, we don't have time for R&D. In fact, that's what they do all day long, right? The only way you can stay in business as a small business is if you can do something faster, better, cheaper than the way big companies do it. So they're constantly innovating. They just don't think of it that. They just think of it as survival. We got to find a better way to do this, or we won't be here tomorrow. And in fact, they're some of our best innovators out there with a lot of things that these small companies are doing. The environment for innovation, and in a minute I'm going to go to the public policy part, sort of where the problems are and where we need to help them. The environment for innovation is really, really important because we just don't see a lot of that. What we don't see being done well enough, for example, is when I said cross-functional, what I mean is sometimes someone in the banking industry has a new customer service solution that we could be using in healthcare. And healthcare is separate from banking, which is separate from agriculture. In fact, a lot of times when we think about R&D and innovation, everybody, what's sexy is the internet, right? Companies like our own company, Priceline, it's an online internet company that grew to a $50 billion market value today. That's a great media story. But the truth is there aren't very many of those. What you see, like I said, I'll stick with my Africa example, is lots of agricultural innovation, which is really important. So there are startups that don't get attention because they're not on the internet. And because, in fact, they won't become the next Facebook or the next Priceline or whatever. But that's a sad state of affairs. Because what that means is all these great innovations in healthcare, the trip that I was just on in Malaysia, the winners of our contest, I judged the business plan competition. By the way, both were African companies, and they were both solving the education problem. How do we make education more accessible across all of Africa so more people have a chance for a better life? So they weren't sexy internet businesses, they were solving education problems with new infrastructure and new tools. So working together across industries to share solutions is really important. Rewarding imagination, right? When people are thinking up ideas, making sure that that's being recognized everywhere that you see. It doesn't matter if it didn't work. What matters is that people are trying things and thinking outside the box and making suggestions. Sometimes the crazy ideas are the ones that turn out and say, wait, that sounded crazy at first, but now it just sounds brilliant. If people don't have the mindset to start throwing out ideas, they don't feel open to that, and they don't have the DNA for change, we just lose a lot of innovation. A brilliant idea never gets out of somebody's shower where they came up with a great idea, but they never tell anybody about it. What they need is a process, and now we'll get into where we can help them. The process is being able to recognize innovation and do experiments. Right? Some of the most innovative companies in the world, in fact, one right here in the US that people don't think of, when you ask people for innovative companies, they'll tell you Apple and Google. But you know who's one of the most innovative companies in this country? Whirlpool. Do you know what they make? Washing machines and dryers and blenders, appliances. But almost all of the new innovation in their entire field, in small electronics and appliances, is coming from one company. And here's why. They have an environment where if you suggest an idea, not only do they pull you out of your job for a few weeks and have people cover for you, but they give you a little bit of cash. They seed experiments. When somebody, they say, that sounds kind of interesting, let's give him a couple weeks to see if he can prove it. You guys cover for him because it's to the good of the company, and someday when you have an idea, he'll cover for you. And they give him a little bit of cash to let him try his experiment. Companies that make room to experiment are the ones that win big, and that's a big part of the R&D and innovation architecture. Another piece that really surprises me is the lack of cooperation between the three sort of legs of the stool, between small businesses, large corporations, and academia. So we did some experiments that we did actually on a ship. We said, in the interest of time, I just got a couple more minutes here. We sailed a ship full of entrepreneurs and small business creators. We sailed 100 days around the world as an experiment. And we stopped in India and Africa, we did different countries. We stopped in China, we stopped in Japan, we stopped in Spain. We took these entrepreneurs around the world to explore innovation in different cultures and sort of different environments. But we brought some big companies in. Microsoft came, SAP came from Europe, Nike came from the US. Here's an interesting thing. When large companies go to SMEs and say, could you take a shot at this? We can't solve this problem. And give the SMEs in their community around them a chance to solve their problems, amazing innovations happen. By the same token, we did the same thing with universities. Sometimes we come to universities like this one. I work with a marketing class here at George Washington, and we just give students, they do this for free, okay? And you give them your problem. So you say, here's a problem that needs innovating, we need a solution for it, can you guys take a shot at it? So having large corporations call the local entrepreneurs and small businesses in their community, or having businesses call the universities in their community, and saying, let's all work on a problem together. Most big companies never think that way, but the smart ones are trying that and finding that innovation is much better in a team. So the last thing I want to talk about here is sort of the structural piece for where we need the public policy help. So when I'm in a lot of these places and we see an innovator with a great idea and we say, why don't we launch that? In many countries, they say, Jeff, you know what it takes just to launch a business here? It takes 6 months. You have to go through all the paperwork. It costs all kinds of money. It is more difficult just to create a company than it is to actually build the product and launch it. So one place we need help all over the world is the process to create a new company needs to be cheap and fast. Otherwise, people don't launch ideas because they can't even create an entity within which to launch the ideas. The second piece is a lot of times they tell me about labor laws. They say, look, I'm a small business, I don't even know if it's going to work. But in some countries, whether it's immigration laws, getting talent in and out of the country, or whether it's the fact that in some countries when you hire somebody, if you let them go, you have to pay them for a year. How is a small business going to agree to sign on an employee for a year? They don't even know if they're going to be here in 6 months. So there are labor laws that are difficult. The third one is let me go to the fourth one, which is allow for failure. So I was in one country recently, I won't name it publicly, but I said, why don't you, that's a great idea, it'll create jobs all over your country, why don't you launch it? And you know what the guy said to me? These small business owners said, because in our country, if we fail, we go to prison. He said, if we take money, we launch this company, and it doesn't work, we literally face prison time. That's not exactly the way to spur innovation. And I got to talk to that government official. And I was a little unsure, but I was able to say, look, you got to be kidding me. You tell me you're proud of your country and you want to create innovation and economic opportunity, but you jail your people when they fail and can't repay the loan, you will never get anywhere with that kind of structure. So there's infrastructure problems like this all over. The last one, and I'll quit here, but I'm going to leave my email on the screen for a sec, because I love to continue the conversation with people. The last piece, of course, is access to capital. And let me close by giving you a good example. We have these meetings with the Prime Minister in Malaysia, who asked this question, what do I need to do to make it easier for innovation and R&D and SMEs in my country? They responded by their government set aside $250 million in cash that any entrepreneur can just apply for. It's not a loan. You don't have to pay it back, and they don't take equity. They don't take a piece of your company. They just come and check you and meet with you, and if it seems like you're legitimately trying to launch a business in their country, they will give you money out of a government fund that could not be easier to get to give you a shot at launching your company. If it fails, they were tracking you, and at least you gave it a shot so that they're giving their citizens a chance to create more small businesses and more innovation. I think that new fund in Malaysia is a brilliant example of a government that asked the question, how can we help, and then actually listened and did something about it. Thank you.